Hello everyone, Jared here, and in today's video, we're continuing with our trip around Wuhan, visiting all of its museums.
Well, we just finished the Hubei Provincial Museum, and now we're going to just walk right across the street to go to the art museum. Leaving the museum, there's still lines, but there probably aren't any lines for the art museum right over there.
And I was right. There absolutely were no lines at all. So now I can almost say with certainty that if you go here, you won't have to deal with lines when you try to go in. But anyways, this was my third time coming to this art museum, and the exhibits rotate regularly, so you never know what you're gonna find here. On this trip, however, they happen to be highlighting a variety of international lacquer art. And if I'm gonna be honest with you, this was probably the least exciting of all the various exhibits that they'd had so far at the museum out of the times that I'd come here. But what I'm going to do is highlight a few of the good ones for you to see, in addition to some bizarre ones as well. Throughout the museum, they also had a variety of sculptures, to which I asked this simple question, why do they exist? But maybe I just don't appreciate sculptures and certain forms of art nearly as much as others. And although this wasn't necessarily the best time to visit this art museum, it will most certainly have changed by the time anyone else goes to see it.
When you come here, not every time are you going to find something that's really worthwhile. Unfortunately, it seems that that's what's happening today.
And because of this, what I'm going to show you right now are a couple of these other exhibits that they've had in the past, starting with these painted works by Qinling. There was also one thing on the same day at this museum that was a little different. One unique feature of this museum is that they have exhibitions highlighting projects from college and university students in Wuhan, some of which even came from the university where I was working. But a lot of what was on display here were ideas for animation and graphical design for video games and cartoon shows that they hoped to bring into existence. Other art projects that were here were designed around various products that you could find in the real world, and smacking some kind of design or brand that the students created on top of them. There were a lot of different ideas going on in this room, and for those who say China doesn't have a lot of creativity, they would definitely need to see an exhibit like this one. Now, the final other exhibit that I've seen here before was yet another painting exhibit known as the Sea of Rhyme, which primarily highlighted a variety of paintings of the sea. And what I'm going to do here yet again is show you just a few of the highlights. And now back to our actual visit at the museum. Once you make it onto the second floor and go higher up, the exhibits pretty much stay the same regardless of when you come to visit, so many of these sculptures are going to be here regardless of when you decide to come here. Although I do have one that I particularly like, which is this, a black and white room, which when you look at it from afar, you have a very hard time telling, at least aside from the couch and chair in front, which pieces are in the forefront and which are in the background. I'd never seen anyone create this kind of illusion with furniture before, and I'm guessing that to this day I still haven't seen every single piece that's actually out on the floor, and been able to differentiate it between what's in the background. Although, I think if you look closely, or on the sides, you'll probably have a better shot at being able to tell which ones are which, just like we're doing here in this video. Anyways, once we finished looking at everything that was up here, we decided it was finally time to head on down, check out the gift shop for a moment, and then go out of the museum off to our next destination.
Well, we've done our first 2 museums of the day, and we're about to do our last one in Wuhan today, which is the Wuhan Museum that we hoped we would go and see yesterday, but it was closed on a Friday, which is rather odd. But anyways, let's see what this one has for us.
And so here we were, at the Wuhan Museum, which was supposed to highlight the history of the Wuhan area. Although, they don't only have exhibits highlighting the history of Wuhan, because when we were there, they had one large floor exhibit dedicated to telling us about the history of Mongolian culture during the time of Genghis Khan and onwards. For us, this was definitely one of the highlights of this museum, and it was also probably the least crowded museum we'd been into throughout our entire trip around China. Of course, the exhibit started with talking about Genghis Khan, and also the various weaponry that he used in his conquests of the world, including early versions of gunpowder weapons, creating the earliest forms of grenades, bombs, and even hand cannons. I thought that was pretty neat to see in person. Then there were also other objects such as the passes, which were required to be held by anyone who wished to travel across the Mongolian Empire. And just like those weapons earlier, it was my first time to be able to see some of these things in person. Additionally, in this exhibit, they had a lot of different clothing and items that would be worn by people as they traveled across the Mongolian steppes, such as horse bridles and stirrups, saddles, satchels and pouches, as well as canteens, tankards, dishes, silverware, and even weaponry. But perhaps most interesting to me was this next one, a chopsticks carrying case. I'm surprised that this was my first time I'd ever encountered one of these in China, but it made a whole lot of sense to me that these existed. Following this was also some traditional dress worn by the Mongolian women during special celebrations, and also some jewelry to accompany it. But it wasn't all just about the clothing. There was also a lot of interesting things that I would never have expected to find here, such as some games that I wish I understood a little bit more of. Also, there was a lot of religious iconography related to Buddhism all around this area too, and not all of it was just exclusively Mongolian Buddhism. There was also a lot dedicated to Tibetan Buddhism here. So if you're interested in seeing Buddhist iconography from the past, you might want to come here to see it. However, probably one of the most fascinating parts of this entire Mongolian exhibit was this last section, highlighting a variety of pottery and dishes. Let me know what you think about some of these in the comments down below. Moving on from the Mongolian exhibit, there was a small room that was dedicated to a man called Yang Ming, who was a famous Neo-Confucian scholar during the Ming Dynasty period, around 500 years ago, and many of his written works are here on display. Now, I'm not someone who's really fascinated with calligraphy, so I don't have too much here to show you, but I'm sure that those who are really interested in the subject will be able to have a great time looking at everything that's here. And next, we were moving on to the final part of the museum, which pretty much took up the last 2 floors, highlighting Wuhan's history throughout the ages, starting with, of course, ancient Chinese kingdoms before the very first dynasty, well over 2,000 years ago, up until modern times. And yet again, I'm going to show you some of the highlights. So, here you go. What did you think of that last one? That was probably my favorite. Anyways, after that, the very top floor is where they highlight the more modern history with fewer artifacts on display and more descriptions on various events that happened since the Qing dynasty and onwards, including some maps, like you're seeing here, of how Wuhan looked during the final dynasty. This exhibit starts by having a few small sections highlighting the Opium War and Lin Zexu's suppression of opium around China, which includes some artifacts from that period, before moving up into the Wuchang Uprising, an event that happened here in Wuhan, which began the overthrowing war against the final dynasty, to the rise of capitalism across China during the late teens, the 20s, and early 30s, as new types of clothing, shelter, transportation, and other goods were introduced into China, which helped the nation develop quickly as a whole. Buildings across China started to have a lot more Western influence during this period as well. And they have a few displays set up so that you can see what it would have looked like to live in China during this period. And after that, of course, World War II started, and there's a lot of information about the war against Japan in this museum, including old photographs of what the city looked like after the Japanese troops set fire to almost the entire city. And of course, following this section on World War II is also the victory of the Communist Party against the Nationalists during the Chinese Civil War, with their troops entering the streets, and then the industrialization period of China that followed afterwards. But that pretty much brings to an end everything that was of interest at this museum. I hope you enjoyed what you got to see at these 2 museums today in Wuhan, and that you'll come back next time as we continue our trip around Wuhan, as we go to have some good food, as well as go see some interesting sights. So, until next time. Thank you again for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. Also, please share this channel with others so we can make the channel grow together as I continue to put out more videos.